Welcome to European Writers Club, and this is our first open club session. I'm Thomas Gammeltoft, and I'm heading this program. European Writers Club is initiated and founded by Vision Denmark, Academic in Spain, the Estonian Film Institute, Screen Ireland, and the Danish Filmskole, where we are now. With European Writers Club, we want to inspire and encourage for exchanging, collaboration, and co-creation on stories for TV series relevant for a larger European audience at once. As such, all that we are doing is focusing on writers and the process of writing. And we will be building a network in between writers in Europe, independent producers, and the public service broadcasters, the private broadcasters, and the local streamers. Physically, we'll be working out of 4 hubs in Europe: Copenhagen, Tallinn, Dublin, and Santiago de Compostela. And in all of these 4 hubs, we will be conducting our open clubs, which is masterclasses or workshops on the demand from the local industry, but always with an outreach to the rest of Europe via our EVC TV. As such, it's an honor for me to have this first open club session for you today. It's done in collaboration with Copenhagen TV Festival and Copenhagen Series Masterclass. And it's a great honor to have the creator of all the seasons of Borgen, Adam Price, with us. And we have divided this session, this open club, into 2. As the first one will be a talk with him and moderator Molly Madene Stengård. And the second one, we have also been very honored and very privileged to have with us his actress in all the seasons of Borgen, Birgitte Hjort Sørensen, playing Katrine Fønsmark, to join into a conversation about the collaboration between actor and creator on an international series like this. So without further ado, enjoy, hopefully get inspired, look out for new editions of our Open Club on EVC TV. Let's create stories together.
Yes, welcome, and welcome, Adam. I've been looking forward to this. I remember watching the first season of Borgen with my teenage children, and besides seeing a great drama series, I also thought that, okay, they got hooked on democracy, actually, and they got hooked on politics, and got interested in something that was quite more difficult for the school to engage them in. So I was thinking maybe you could say something about what does this quite public service-minded approach mean to you?
Well, it means a great deal. I've always been very interested in politics, power politics, perhaps because I was a child of 2 actors. Every scene is about power, naturally. So watching them on stage, always someone who drives the scene, always someone who wins the scene, who loses the scene. So politics on stage was my first kind of way into this. And then the political situation of Denmark and democracy as such became a huge focus point for me. So when I went to DR back 12, 13 years ago and said I would very much like to write a political show, they, of course, wanted a premise. They wanted me to kind of focus the idea even more because it was a really bad pitch. I would like to do something about Danish coalition politics. I mean, who would want to see that? So I went back and I worked on the idea. And I could see that some of the brilliant attempts that had been done in Denmark, writing political stories, they had kind of taken the cynical angle.
Yes.
So very much, you could say, stories that were in line with one of the best political movies ever, All the President's Men.
Yes.
Which is basically the story about, it's up to the conscientious journalist to bring down the corrupt politician.
Yes.
And I kind of thought that democracy in Denmark, even though we bash our politicians, we don't like them, sometimes we don't like them, but we believe in the system.
Yes.
We actually believe in the system, we believe in the Danish democracy. So I thought it should be, in some ways, a tribute to democracy, for good and bad, but it should be. And then we discussed intensely with DR back then, and also this time, naturally, because DR is also a very political institution in Denmark.
Yes.
Very political.
Dependent.
So they were saying constantly balance, Adam, balance.
Between what and what?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just basically not to give the floor to one political viewpoint too long time at the time. You know, basically to hand the mic to various political views and to represent the whole spectrum. And that was the main idea, basically. And I've been very conscious about paying tribute to democracy as it's seen. And naturally, now that it has become an international show, people are also watching it and saying, "Oh my God, is Denmark like this?" And you know, in the UK, they're saying, "Oh, this is the coalition monster everybody's talking about," because we have this tradition around coalition and compromise. Basically.
Yes.
So I've been very, very conscious about basically paying tribute and also balance all the time.
Yes. And it must have been quite interesting to work with something that close to reality. But it's not reality. The parties are not called what the parties are called and stuff like that. But how did you have any kind of rules or set of rules of how to work with reality?
Yeah, we had to, because as said, when we began back then, DR being that political, it would be after the question to talk about real politicians. So we have basically built a Denmark, which is a parallel Denmark. So society is just like Denmark, but the parties are called slightly different names.
Yes.
Though the Workers' Party, I mean, most people will probably know what we're talking about, right? So we are kind of getting close, and sometimes very close, and sometimes less close, but still, people know what we're talking about. We also made the rule that we would not address any immediate political situations, calling them by name. We would, however, keep all the ministries, the names of ministries and institutions and the Danish society, because
and procedures, I guess.
It would become too weird, basically, if we also wanted to do different names there. But then we are not addressing any situations with politicians, historical names. Back 30, 40 years, we would not do that. However, people that have really studied the show can see that we have actually made a few mistakes down that line.
Yeah.
And actually,
on purpose or not on
and
purpose?
Actually, the brilliant actor Ole Testrup, who played Svend Åge Saltum, the right-wing politician in the first 3 seasons, he actually, in I think it's episode 2 of the first season, he mentions Mogens Glistrup, a very famous Danish politician, who was dead at the time, but still, it was actually a deviation from the rule that I just mentioned. So we've made, I think, a few mistakes, but not too many, I think.
No. Did you wanted people, of course, to make the connections between your fiction characters?
Definitely. We want to portray the Danish democracy as closely as we possibly can. And also taking up topics that are very hot in Danish politics, but twisting them just a little bit.
Yeah.
And of course, we were very lucky with the first season, because we basically wanted to tell the story of the first female prime minister of Denmark. And then we happened to be so damned lucky that Helle Thorning-Schmidt came into power.
Yes.
3 months after Birgitte Hjort Sørensen came into power.
Yeah.
And it was just plain luck. But then we got kind of the reputation that we had a crystal ball and we were able to foresee what would happen.
Great.
And that has been mentioned several times. And of course, it's just being lucky.
Yeah.
And actually studying politics as closely as we possibly can.
Yeah. Did you ever... Did real events ever give you trouble? Did you at any time need to change anything in the development because things happened, or was something too close?
Yeah, I can give you an example of a couple of places where we actually changed stuff. So in the second season, some people remember, there are two episodes where she's actually solving an international political situation in Africa. back in season 2. And we were actually writing about the then current situation in Sudan.
Yes.
And we wanted it to be about Sudan. But then the Danish Foreign Ministry actually called us and said, you might want to change that. It's interesting. Also, I think there had been some trouble at the Susan Beer movie taking place also in the Darfur region.
Yes.
And there had actually been a few incidents there that had been not very nice. About, basically spies from the Khartoum regime that were kind of very interested in that film production. And we didn't really want that.
No.
And we could see that it also gave us certain problems being wanted to write about current affairs in Africa, because you needed to be so precise about that exact situation. So we changed, and we constructed the African country Karun, which was placed just where Sudan is. And basically we could retain the story, but we changed the name. And I think that was probably good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are you're always leaning on tendencies, right? In the time, in the current time.
Definitely. I mean, we also had we wrote an episode about Danish pig production. Now, whatever you do, don't mess with Danish pig production. That is just take it as a very good advice. So it was the same actor, Ole Testrup, who was also, one of the very few now members of parliament who also has a profession at the side of that.
Yes.
And he was a farmer in northern Jutland. And we actually had a scene where he was cutting off the tails of little piglets. As they do in conventional pig production. And it just exploded. It exploded. And I was called into the current affairs political show on P1 Danish radio. Basically to stand like this with the vice president of the Danish Agricultural Association to defend my disgusting ideas about Danish pig production. It was very interesting. Very interesting.
The first 3 episodes, seasons, were broadcasted within 3 years, actually. Then 9 years passes until the 4th season.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
Why a 4th season?
We actually said back then, we said to each other, because it had become such a great success and nobody expected that, so we kind of played with the idea that, maybe we should get the band together again at one time, if the right idea comes along. And I think actually Sisse said at the wrap party of the 3rd season, see you in 10 years, Adam, and she just went out the door. And it was just a joke, really. It was nothing more than that. And then an idea actually did come along. And it's actually quite a while ago. It was about 5-6 years ago. I was basically brought to their attention that there was this interesting law that basically guards the relationship between the Greenlandic government and the Danish government. And it basically says that if something of extreme value is ever found in Greenland, it is up to negotiations between the two countries to basically divide the riches between them. Now, that is a direct invitation to conflict.
Yes, yeah.
So I thought, brilliant, let's do something about that. And I actually talked to, I think it was the brilliant screenwriter Jannik Tej Mosholt. He worked a bit on the idea and we discussed it. And I didn't think it would become Borgen ever.
No. So you worked with it in another context.
Yes, I thought it would be a political thriller of some kind. And then at the same time, Netflix moved into Europe, and we had a few meetings with them, and they were, the leadership of Netflix, they were very, very enthusiastic Borgen fans, and they said, could you ever dream of doing a new season? And then, the puzzle began to move into place. Because I thought also when working with the idea, I could see it was just like storylining a new episode of Borgen. It was all the same locations. Interior, Ministry of State, Day, the Prime Minister's office, main news channels. It was all the same. And I just thought, well, if they really want Borgen and DR they're not too reluctant, we might get them at the same table. And we managed to do so.
Yeah, great.
So, and that was also a political thing.
Yeah, always. But I would like to show a clip now.
Yeah.
It's actually the title sequence from season 1.
Yeah.
going straight into the title season from season 4.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Because when I watched it, I found that there's quite a big difference in tonality, even in the title sequence, that are quite representative.
Yeah.
So let's watch that. Yeah, even the music.
Definitely, yeah.
Same theme, but different.
Yeah.
It's. Can you say something about? I know that the title sequence is made late in the process, but it must represent, of course.
But definitely, I mean, we wanted a different feel to this new season. We also wanted to basically say this is something new, because after 9 years, you just don't throw in a new season. You're basically reinventing the show. And we wanted to underline that. Tone-wise, mood-wise, it should be something. We are moving deeper into the characters. It's also darker. And it has a different image system, the second one. Also because it takes place in Greenland. And then the administrative center in Copenhagen. And you have this image system with ice melting. And also these slabs of ice that actually look like papers on a dark desk at the same time. So in a way, the world is melting, dissolving, and it's darker around the characters.
Yeah, it's almost melancholic sometimes.
It is, definitely. And then it has this, which I love very much, it has this Greenlandic element of the Greenlandic, they have this special way of singing, which is this breathing, this rhythm of breath, and you can hear that kind of. And I love the way that the August Fink, our composer, actually molded that into, blended that into the new theme.
Yes.
So basically, we wanted to remind with the strings that it was still Borgen. Mm-hmm. But it was deeper, darker, more contemplative. And that is also the mood of the show, because the main characters are older. They are in a different section, a different chapter of their lives. And they have become somewhat darker in their scope. Especially Nyborg becomes darker. She becomes trapped in her own, you could say, the choice of being lonely.
Yeah.
The implications of that choice actually hits her, strikes her all of a sudden.
It's almost like disillusion is a huge part of it as well, compared to earlier. Is that connected to age, you think?
Well, of course, Borgen is... I don't know,
I'm sorry, we are same age.
That's a good question. Well, Borgen is a study of power and the people that basically have the power and how they use power and how they are changed by power. And we kept the old premise, basically, are you able to remain in power and still remain true to yourself? But I wanted personally to go deeper into that question. So in this new season, basically, Birgitte Nyborg has all her attention is on her role as foreign minister. That is basically the whole, you could say that her life is basically circling around this position. And so we are basically posing the question is in this new season, if you put all of your energies into the position that you hold, the power position you hold, and you basically cut off all that keeps you in contact with real life, then your position becomes too precious for you. And it becomes too difficult to leave that position. And we have this kind of general idea, I think, in politics as such, and possibly especially in Denmark, that power is something we lend you for a few years, and then you pass it on to someone else. And, well, there's an election coming up, you know. I mean, so you don't know how long you hold this political power. It's precious while you have it, but you should also be able to let it go.
There's a danger if it's too precious.
Definitely. She holds it too tightly. And she doesn't have a partner in her life. She doesn't have the daily contact with her kids anymore. Nothing. Her house is basically like a hotel room. She buys her own flowers because then there's at least flowers, so, you know, someone to come home to. At least there are flowers on in a vase. It's a bit sad, but she when she talks to her old friend and once ally Katrine Fønsmark in the first episode, she's saying, "Hey, I'm having the time of my life. You know, basically I've fixed everything so I can work 19 hours a day. Doesn't it sound great to you?
Finally allowed to work."
And she's saying, "Well, yeah, you look really happy." So it's and that is the core of the new season. That loneliness, and basically the question: if you invest too much in your position, it becomes too difficult to let go, and then your choices in dilemmas will become muddy. They will become dangerous because you're too afraid of losing.
It seems like a repeated theme in your work, at least in Borgen, very much. This balance between working life and privacy.
And the private lives. Definitely. Definitely.
Is that you also?
Definitely. I mean, I think if you do something and if you have been allowed to do something that you love so much, I love my work so much, naturally it also brings sacrifices. And finding that work-life balance is enormously difficult, especially if your work life is also your passion. And I was brought up into basically the theatre world with two parents that also were incredibly into their careers because it was art. It was their art. They loved it so much. So naturally, we didn't see them as much as you would probably have been able to see parents that didn't have this passionate relationship with their work. And so that is the challenge for me as well. I mean, naturally, and so I don't think I've ever written anything that didn't have just a strain of this conflict. And I probably never will.
I think that back to age, not to, but I think that there was, when I watched the fourth season, I think there was an element of when you become older, I think that you feel sometimes it would be lovely just to say what you really mean, even though that it's very improper. And I think that when you talk to people at the age of 80, maybe, they're like, finally, I can say whatever I want, and I don't give a shit what people think.
Yeah.
So I think we should watch a scene where Birgitte Nyborg, she's always been quite direct as a character, but where she clearly oversteps borders.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about that.
Ja. Det må jeg undskylde. Den internationale presse interesserer sig en del fra Kina.
Gør den grønlandske også.
Velkommen.
En departementchef. En Lybert.
Emmy Rasmussen, afdelingschef i formandens departement.
Hyggeligt at møde jer.
I lige måde.
Ej, var den fin.
Tak.
Meget. Skal vi sidde?
Kunne I tænke jer en sandwich?
Nej, tak.
Nej.
Nej, tak.
Ej, tak.
Nej, okay.
Du er altså heller ikke.
Fint.
Jeg er rigtig glad for, at I havde mulighed for at komme herned. Paragraf 10 i selvstyreloven siger tydeligt, at der skal forhandles mellem den grønlandske regering Naalakkersuisut og den danske stat om fordeling af indtægter fra råstoffer i Grønland.
Ja, jeg vil gerne...
Du skal nok få lov, Hans. Jeg kan forstå på Asger, at jeres udgangspunkt er, at når vi har udfaset bloktilskuddet, så tilfalder resten af oliepengene Grønland. Og nu vil jeg jo ikke forsimple vores forhandlinger, men dybest set er vi i gang med at fordele en kage. Og det, du siger, Hans, er, at I vil have hele kagen.
Det er jo fordi, det er vores kage.
Måske skal vi lige se, hvor stor den kage i virkeligheden er.
Ja. Et positivt skøn baseret på de nuværende oliepriser lyder på en samlet værdi på lige omkring 2.000 milliarder kroner.
Det er en stor kage.
Jo, men det er jo ikke provenyet, det er jo den samlede værdi af hele feltet. Og så skal der svares 80% til olieselskabet.
Ja, det er så ikke helt rigtigt. Selskabets andel vil falde ret markant, så snart deres første investering bliver betalt ud.
Altså, selv et konservativt skøn vil give en indtægt på 1.000 milliarder, hvilket er det samme som det nuværende bloktilskud i 250 år. Eller som at give hver eneste nulevende grønlænder 17,8 millioner kroner.
Ja, men det er jo også penge, der skal bruges til at finansiere vores selvstændighed.
Men hvad vil I så gøre, når olien slipper op? Og hele verden kører i elbiler. Da aftalen blev lavet i 2009, valgte man jo netop, at Grønland og Danmark skulle forhandle om det, fordi Grønland heller ikke var parat til at kappe båndet til Danmark.
Men det er vi jo så nu.
Det er dit parti, Hans. Selvstændighed er jo ikke din regerings officielle politik. Jeg ved godt, der er røster i Grønland, der mener, at Danmark har behandlet jer rigtig dårligt, og at de kæmper for at afkolonisere jer. Men jeg kan så fortælle, at der er medlemmer af det danske Folketing, som på ingen måde er enige, og dem repræsenterer jeg også.
Ja, men vi er jo ikke en teenager, som beder om lov til at flytte hjemmefra. Vi er flyttet. Nu skal I jo bare vise, at I har tiltro til, at vi også kan klare os selv.
Men det kan I jo ikke. Hvad vil der ske, hvis vi trækker os ud i morgen?
Det er ikke nogen hemmelighed, at det meste af jeres offentlige forvaltning er noget, som Danmark leverer.
Jamen, det er jo den måde, Danmark fastholder os i et afhængighedsforhold på.
Du simpelthen holde op. Behøver jeg at nævne, hvor mange politiske skandaler, der har været i Grønland gennem årene? Embedsmisbrug, nepotisme, korruption.
Det er vi ved at styre på nu. Og det er jo ikke nødvendigvis sådan, at vi skal bruge danske løsninger til grønlandske problemer.
Fint. Skal vi så bare sige, at vi tales ved, når I har fået styr på selvmordsprocenten, alkoholmisbruget og det udbredte seksuelle misbrug?
Jeg bliver nødt til at sige, at i dag handler det om olien, så skal vi prøve at holde fokus.
Jo, lad os gøre det. Ved du, hvem jeg danser med på jeres vegne? USA, Rusland, Kina.
Men vi har jo ikke de samme problemer med Kina, som I har.
Nej, men det er fordi, du er så naiv, Hans. I sidder på en ø på størrelse med hele Vesteuropa, og I er knap lige så mange, som der er indbyggere i Vejle. Hvad er det, du godt kunne tænke dig? At blive et selvstændigt arktisk Bahrain? I ender jo som en kastebold mellem amerikanerne og kineserne. De æder jer levende, og de er da bedøvende ligeglade med, om I er et oprindeligt folk.
Vi er jo selvstyre!
Ja, på grund af en lov vedtaget af det danske Folketing. Og ultimativt kan den lov laves om.
Hvis du så er gået ringe i, vi bare...
Nå,
Ja.
jeg prøver bare at byde Grønland velkommen til virkelighedens verden.
Lige der var du måske en lille smule...
Det var tydeligt. Det er noget andet.
Det her bliver en lortesag. Og du har altså også brug for en personlig rådgiver. Birgitte.
It must feel quite liberating to write as well. That she is this out of order in a way, right? Or
Yes,
overstepping borders.
She is, and it's also possibly the long-time effects of having had so much power as that character, Birgitte Nyborg, has had for maybe 25 years. She has been among the selected few at the very top of the Danish political system. And so she's grown accustomed to being heard. Always. And she's been a minister, she's been prime minister, for Christ's sake. So she's so accustomed to everybody saying, what do you think, Mrs. Nyborg? Okay, yes, we'll do that immediately. And when Greenland is arriving, she knows that she's actually talking with, government officials. She's talking to a minister at her own level. But still, they're just like, the county board of Vejle, I mean, a Danish county, a small Danish county, because how many people are living in Greenland? 56,000 people. So it is not a balanced relationship,
No.
because they don't have complete autonomy. At the moment it's about security politics and foreign politics, Denmark is still basically the one with the power.
Yeah.
So she's losing it, and she's losing it on many levels. But at the same time, I promise you, because we really wrote that scene and weighed every single word on a very, 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 very particular scale, because we knew that this would really be the scene that also Greenland would be looking at. And they are so accustomed to Denmark overstepping it.
Yeah.
They think we've overstepped it for 200, 300 years, and we have in many cases. But at the same time, there are also sometimes not very realistic viewpoints from certain, not all, but certain politicians in their backyard. So, I mean, it's difficult. I promise you, we really tried to throw in arguments on each side that were something that you could hear in the corridor. Might not at the conference table, but in the corridor, you definitely would hear them. Now they have to be, we will bring them into reality. They are completely oblivious to what is happening on the international scene, and now we're going to tell them stuff like that. And we basically just gave her full force. Full force.
It feels when you watch it, it's like, oh yeah, ooh, but she's right.
She's right. She's in a way right sometimes, but she's just way too much.
Yeah.
Way too much.
I think like maybe 10 years ago, it could be a problem to bring forward at least a female main character being that non-likable. And I think that she is, in the first 3 seasons, she's sometimes really direct. She sometimes really forgets her kids.
Yeah.
That's not so nice, but still, it's she's within the likable point. Did you consider things like that? Has that changed also in your opinion, that now characters can be more edgy, or is it something you look for?
Definitely, because I mean, I'm a child of different times as well. I mean, so back in the day when I began watching TV shows, there was always an air of niceness to a TV show, and there were limits to how dark you could take a character. Basically, they were pretty heroic or comedic, and that would be the nature of the TV show 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But now there are, and we would always say that it would be the realm of the feature film to portray the darkest characteristics of the human soul. It would
so
be
that was on feature films,
that was
not
on
in
feature
TV series,
films or theater. Basically, just other media within the dramatic storytelling. And now there are no limits to what we can tell within the TV series. And that is, I think, something we should really be incredibly grateful for. And we should use that leverage, basically. We should use it at all times. So we wanted to go deeper with all the with the main characters. We wanted to go much deeper, much darker, and also pushing the character. And that was, I mean, I know we'll be talking about that later also with you, Birgitte. But sometimes it is a battle of wills, of course. And Sisse had also been accustomed to being quite sympathetic.
Yes.
So and of course she knows, just like Birgitte knows, her character almost more than I know the character, you know? So it is a negotiation.
Yeah.
But I think we should push those limits. And
Yes.
it's also much more interesting to act, I hope, as long as it's true to character or within the possibilities of the character. I think we should use the full scope.
Yes.
And we really tried to do so this time.
Did
so
you?
even though she's not very sympathetic here, we take her much darker.
Yes.
Three episodes along, further on, she's basically sacrificing her kid on national TV in order to prove a political point.
Yeah.
You know? That is really bad.
But it seems like relatable has changed from being likable to being realistic. So that you sometimes watch people behave as badly as you could maybe do yourself. So that's part of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is also what the art form, where the art form is, where it's taking all of us. And we should use the full scope. We should use all the colors that we have in the box.
Is there to balance with that? Is there something that you could call Borgen DNA? Would there be a limit? Do you think to if you just felt like, okay, this is going really, really dark, or this is there a limit that is within the concept or in the DNA of Borgen?
Yeah, of course. I think there is. I think we would want because it still has that heroic trait to it. So we would want the main characters to get back to where they should be. We would want them to come back at some point.
Come home. At
Yeah,
some point.
yeah. But we are taking them almost out of orbit. You know, almost. But still, there's some gravity of heroism that is pulling them back, I think, because that is the nature of the show, and we would change that nature for good if we hadn't brought her back. You know, in the 8th episode, where she basically sees what she's been doing also to her son. But she's also being pragmatic, I would say, in the 8th episode. Some people say, oh, it's too soft and she's growing and now she's just the old heroic monster again. I don't think really that is completely true. I think she's also a very pragmatic politician, the way we're trying to bring her back. Anyway, that was the ambition.
Yeah. And when you work with structure and of the whole thing, is it mainly the private stuff or the political stuff that takes space there for you, or is it both? And how do you work with it, beginning with an idea about Borgen in Greenland, I guess?
That is interesting. I think you could say that the main plot that we're going to deal with climate change. We're going to deal with something as nasty as fossil fuels. In Greenland, the most precious jewel.
But not
in
a
the
likable
nature
one.
realm of Denmark and Greenland. So naturally, that was kind of the main plot idea, just to begin with.
Yes.
And of course, you need that also to pitch a political show. I wouldn't be able to pitch it without the plot idea. But then we're definitely moving into the private sector, and looking at her private life, and looking at Katrine Fønsmark, and looking at the main characters, and basically saying, where should we start them? Where are they at the beginning, and how should we move them along? And that would be two, you could say, dramatic curves, arcs that are constantly corresponding.
Yes.
They have to, constantly. So where is she on the private agenda here? She's also pretty far away from the Birgitte that we know. You know, in this particular episode, she is getting very drunk afterwards because she doesn't eat anything because she's forgotten to eat. You know, she's forgetting her organism, also her body. She's completely forgetting
everything. Normalizing.
Everything is kind of out of balance. So she gets drunk. She takes her civil servant to a restaurant. She begins to flirt with him in a senseless way, and then she goes back to her office, senses that she's so drunk that she actually needs to throw up. So she throws up in her basket under her desk. And it's just the most sad moment, you know.
Yeah.
There is the foreign minister. She is throwing up in her office because it's just been so filthy drunk with one of her civil servants. It's just wrong. The whole thing is wrong. And then she hears the devil, played by Peter Myggen, you know, the spin doctor, Laugesen, actually speaking almost as if it's just to her on the evening news, analyzing the political situation and actually praising the politicians that stay even though they are beaten. He's praising those politicians, and she says, I want to be a politician like that. And she calls him. Do you tango?
Yeah.
So it's...
But I think that it's interesting to look at this. First and foremost, it's like this time there was a 9-year gap from last time. That must have been both freedom and also like it should connect somehow, right?
Definitely.
But it connects mainly on character level, doesn't it? And a well-known universe.
It does, and we wouldn't do, you know, one thing that I knew instantly that we wouldn't do was actually just playing as if only a half a year had gone by.
Yeah.
And here they are again. They might look a bit older, but they're not really. Don't let anyone be disturbed by the way they look. That would be strange. So basically, we're looking at the main characters. We're saying, where is Katrine Fønsmark now? Where is Birgitte Nyborg now? And where do we want to move them? So basically, we started off by saying they're 10 years older. They are in a different chapter of their lives. Katrine Fønsmark is now basically moving into big business in the journalistic world. She is approaching, we'll talk more about that later. And Birgitte Nyborg, what choices has she made in the years we haven't seen her? And then at the same time, not to open with too much exposition. Basically just throw them in there.
Not a resume.
And explain along the way.
How do you develop side stories and side characters, which have actually changed a bit? New characters, new side stories. But how do you develop them? How early do you bring them into play? Are they hard to juggle? It seems like you always had quite many.
Borgen
compared to other
Borgen
series.
is a huge universe, and also, I mean, we're looking at the real world of politics and journalism, and we are trying to simplify it. And of course, if real political analysts are looking at our world, it is very much a simplified political world. But at the same time, even though we try to simplify it, we have to have just a vague, idea of how many people will actually be involved. And a lot of people. In every ministry, there's a minister, and every minister has a chief of staff, and every chief of staff has assistants, you know. And it just becomes very many characters. And also looking at the newsroom of Katrine Fønsmark, I mean, there would probably be 2 or 3 times as many people there if it was real. But we have to just make do with what we've got and still make it look kind of real.
And how do you do that selection? Can you say something about it?
Well, we look at the functions we definitely need. So we know that we will need this and this and this function just to make...
Dramatically or realistically?
Realistically, we're also looking, but then, of course, we're looking at what is the main story for Katrine Fønsmark. It would be a workplace story. So who do we need to basically make that story work around her? And I thought it would be interesting, and I know we'll be talking more about that later, to have a character who is almost doing the same job as we saw Katrine Fønsmark do when she arrived at the show 13, 14 years ago. And the same thing naturally with Birgitte Nyborg, but removing people from the private stage of Birgitte Nyborg. That was the main idea for her, because she had this storyline of loneliness. So we would remove people from her, and we will actually add children to the private arena of Katrine Fønsmark, but remove them from Birgitte Nyborg. Also to make a color difference between the 2 homes that we're looking at. One is arriving at a family situation with kids and a husband and building this new wing to their house and things that are relatable to modern people and modern relationships. And Birgitte Nyborg, she's actually living a very artificial life in a house that looks like a hotel room, and she's all alone there, and her kids are not there necessarily unless she brings them in. You know?
Is it so? It almost sounds like you begin with some kind of orchestration of the character gallery more than ideas of what their private or personal storyline could be.
Yeah. I remember I once attended a masterclass here many years ago with the second in command on 24, the old hit show, the old thriller show, and he said it was super interesting. He said, "Yeah, we have this idea that somebody steals the atomic football from the president," and I was just saying, "Okay, and do you know who stole it?" "No, I had no idea." It was so interesting, you know.
Yeah.
Actually, he just opened with a dramatic idea that would definitely throw off some thriller plots.
Yeah.
I didn't know where the hell they were going. We would catch that along the way. And I could never work like that.
No.
I would have to have some kind of structure. I would need to know where are we taking them.
Yes.
Also, when we opened with Borgen back in the day, we actually had a pretty well-structured arc of the first 2 seasons, because that was what we knew we would do.
Yeah.
Back in the day, DR always did 20 episodes, so we knew basically.
Okay,
that
you did 2 at the time.
We did two seasons at the time, 20 episodes. So I needed to know, before writing the first one, I needed to know where will we probably end this in episode 20.
Okay.
Just a vague idea.
Yeah.
Not knowing every step along the way, definitely not. But I would need to know in which direction are we actually heading.
Yeah.
So I was so impressed that the writers of an international hit show 20 times bigger than something we've ever been, they didn't have an idea of where they were going. So amazing.
But that's maybe according to their approach, basically.
Definitely, yeah. But I would need this. So with this new season, I definitely also knew where to bring the characters in, and just where they would probably end.
Yeah.
And we discussed very much in the writers' room how dark we would go, and also bringing the main actors in at a quite early stage. Also discussing their parts.
Yeah, we will talk about that in the second round.
Yeah.
And has there been any side characters or side stories that during the process became annoying or a problem, or you would have wished you didn't introduce, or do you just juggle them? Through?
Of course, we are challenged by time always, and also airtime. We also drop scenes naturally, and as all of a sudden you can have beautiful scenes with very important characters, and you might have to drop them. And also, we did have an almost independent storyline taking place in Greenland.
Yeah.
And actually this time throwing in something which is not very typical for Borgen. We actually threw in a crime thriller element.
Malik.
Exactly. Yeah. So this young Greenlandic guy who actually gets killed or gets found in the place where they used to basically kill themselves, commit an honorable suicide if they were basically a nuisance to the community. The old people would not necessarily, if there wasn't enough food, they would commit an honorable suicide in order for the others to be able to survive. That is so. This place actually exists, and he is found there. Naturally, he probably didn't die of natural causes.
No.
But we're actually throwing in an element which is very un-Borgenish. And I didn't want us to end in, a very time-consuming
investigation.
So basically, we never solve that crime.
No.
And that is, I think, for many people, almost provocative, because in TV drama you just don't kill people without telling who did it
or be interested in it.
So that was almost an experiment, you know, because he is just collateral. That is what Malik ends up being. He's just this young Greenlandic guy who ends up being killed or dying in a process that he didn't know anything about. And he's being used as an instrument between politicians in Denmark. So in a very cynical way, of course, she didn't know Malik and she doesn't know what happened, but she just knew that someone died in Greenland. Nyborg.
Yeah.
And probably during the process that involved her Minister of Justice. Yeah. And he's giving her a hell of a time at a certain stage, and actually challenging her for the party chairman's seat. You know, so she actually uses that collateral death of Malik to fend him off, basically saying, "Would you be able to survive a commission? Basically a survey into what happened up there." Being the responsible minister? I don't think so.
No.
And that is just so cynical, you know? So we use him in that way, but we never say who actually killed him.
No.
He just died.
So something that enters like crime almost ends up being Borgen.
That was really an experiment. And we discussed it so many times, and some people in the writers' room, and they might have been right, said we have to tell people who killed him.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing this, and I still believe that is the right choice. But it was definitely challenging the whole, traditional build-up of how you do a crime story.
Yeah, and how it conflicts with Borgen DNA.
Yeah.
Adam, we're reaching the end of this first section. Let's have a 20 minutes break and meet again 10 minutes to 11.
Amazing.
Thank you. Welcome back, and please give a warm welcome to Birgitte Hjort Sørensen. How was it to pick up upon Katrine Fønsberg so many years later? Did you expect it, and how?
Never. I rejected the idea many times in good faith doing interviews because we never thought we were going to do another season.
No.
When I read the first episode, I felt like I had found an old friend on Facebook. It felt like she'd been alive all this time. I just had no idea what she was up to. It was really interesting because I could really say, oh, well, she got another kid and she's actually still together with this man, which was a surprise for all of us. No, it was really like a really lovely reunion.
Yes, must have been great. I think that I would like to have a quite early clip here, because for me that is the first time a new element in Katrine Fønsberg pops up in a quite sort of like all of a sudden way, casual way. Så lad os se klip 1.
Jeg håber virkelig, at grønlænderne lige vil overveje en ekstra gang, om det ikke er naturen og isen frem for et olieeventyr, der er Grønlands virkelige arvesølv.
Ja, altså jeg har rykket Grønland op, ikke? Den der lille sag om den kabrede svinetransport, jeg ved sgu ikke, om den kan bære et indslag. Det er selvfølgelig meget sjovt, at veganere vælger at kabre en lastbil fuld af svin, som så ender med at rende ud på en landevej, spærre trafikken, og halvdelen af dem bliver aflivet. Altså.
Ja, jo, det er meget sjovt. Måske kan den klare en kort nyt. Men i forhold til Grønland, så synes jeg, det er nu, vi sender en af vores egne folk derop. Og Mie, jeg tænkte, om ikke du har lyst?
Jo, det kan jeg godt.
Fedt, Mie. Tak skal du have.
Okay, men må jeg lige tale med dig engang?
Ja, selvfølgelig. Pia, var vi færdige?
Ja.
Tak.
Ja, jeg vil bare sige til dig, så du ved det, at min kæreste og jeg, vi starter i noget fertilitetsbehandling her nu.
Nej, Mie, det gør du ikke imod mig. Undskyld. Det er jeg rigtig glad for på jeres vejen. Det er super dejligt. Undskyld. Jeg var lige noget med nogle vagtplaner, og vi er lidt tyndt bemandet efter alle fyringerne. Det kommer jeg til at tænke på. Det skal du selvfølgelig slet ikke. Virkelig dejligt, du vil tage til Grønland. Det tror jeg bliver smadret godt. Så lad os lige snakkes videre, når du kommer hjem. Skal vi ikke sige det?
Jo.
Tak.
Yes, that's the presentation, almost one introduction of a major flaw.
Yes,
it develops into, and I think that how did you feel about that? That she was, I think that she's been quite direct earlier also, but this is a flaw, right? This is not nice.
No. But the thing is, you were talking earlier about how when you get to the later stage in life, you feel liberated to say whatever you want. I think Katrine has always felt that liberation. And maybe it's also when you're very young and you can't always, figure out the consequence of stuff. She's been quite outspoken. And to some extent, it's really, served her well as a journalist. But the thing is now, when she's a boss, it's quite a problem for her. And I think that's what she realizes in this scene, that because it's a very natural thing for her to just burst out whatever is on her mind, and then she realizes, oh shit, no, this is not the context in which to say this. And at this stage, I don't think she realizes at all the consequences it will have, throughout the season.
No. It's just a small warning. In a way.
Yeah.
How did you connect it to, Adam, what you said earlier about feeling that you, after this later season, in season 4, had the possibility to have more flawed characters, more edgy characters?
Yeah.
This is not exactly dark, this flaw, but it develops, of course.
It's a bossy slip of the tongue, right?
Yeah.
It's that's all it is. You know, it's just like, oh shit, no, because she's just been looking at the Excel file of employees in her department, and she can see that if I lose that journalist, I'm just fucked, basically. So that's all it is. It was just meant as the small element, but that becomes a stone in the professional shoe, and it just gets really painful at the time. And I very much wanted us to work on that kind of professional story where there's a scene later on where she's actually saying to her husband, if you ask me right now to name what actually started this conflict, I wouldn't be able to.
No.
I don't know why everybody in my department hates me. I really don't know. It just happened, it just happened. Small mistakes, small slips of the tongue, and maybe one decision that I could have made in a different way. But I mean, why is this happening? Why is there a shitstorm on Facebook? And I think, I hope that many people find it relatable, because I think those kind of workplace conflicts that are so nitty gritty, you don't really know what opened them, but they can become really crucial for a character.
And also putting yourself in a position where people would like to hate the person almost, right?
Yeah.
So I can almost imagine your answer, but were you happy about this turn of her becoming more edgy and not so very likable all the time?
I've never had a problem with not being likable, or Katrine not being likable, because she is, she pushes limits. She's always done that, and she's never been very concerned with getting other people's recognition. I guess she would have, but she's not as concerned with other people's opinion of her.
No.
My vanity on her behalf was more that I wanted her to be a better boss. I was like, can she just be a little bit good at this job? Because she's really a competent, accomplished person. But I think there is an important story to tell. It happens in so many trades, so many businesses, that because you're good at what you do professionally, you get a position as a boss. And being a leader is a completely different set of skills. And a lot of people I've talked to in many, many different branches, they receive almost no training in this. So all of a sudden you got the responsibility and you got the power, and you have no idea how to navigate.
No. Except doing what you're used to do almost. Yeah. I think that in this scene we just saw, there was it was quite casual that this private flaw sort of emerged. We talked about earlier that naturally Borgen is also a show that has to have a lot of information. And you also praised Birgitte for being very good at delivering this extremely complicated lines sometimes. So it does just not sound like information so much. But I found a scene with a little help from Birgitte that has this quite many agendas and quite much information, where it must be hard for the actors to work with, and I think we should see it and talk about afterwards also with you, of course, how do you try to work with this level of information and the level of character story that we know from the last hour is very important to you. Så lad os se klip 2.
Okay, jeg finder kæden.
Russia has stepped up their level of aggression in the Arctic region. This morning, Pentagon released information that a Russian submarine surfaced just off the coast of Greenland.
Kom.
It was allegedly a Russian Typhoon-class submarine, like the one shown in this footage, that this morning violated the territorial waters of Denmark, the ally and NATO partner of the U.S., in Northeast Greenland. Several sources close to the White House inform us that the president considers the matter very serious.
Okay, Benjamin, du får en kommentar fra statsministeren, okay?
Ja.
Gitte, hvis du tager et hold med ind til Udenrigsministeriet.
Ja, hvis de overhovedet får lov til at udtale sig før Krav har godkendt olien.
Krav er virkelig Darth Vader i din personlige fortælling, hva'?
Der er en udvikling i gang her, ikke? Og jeg synes, den er syg. Jeg arbejder på et tema for øjeblikket til på søndag under overskriften kort og godt Magtens Danmark. Vi skal helt ind og se på, hvordan statsministeren gang på gang detaljstyrer alle sine ministre.
Det bliver så godt, jeg glæder mig til at se det.
Men Torben, kan du nå at få en snak med forsvarsministeren?
Jeg tror, jeg hørte et nej.
I forhold til
Lad os frede Torben, så han kan koncentrere sig om sit tema. Han skal ikke involvere sig i det med amerikanerne. Hvis du er enig, selvfølgelig.
Ja, så skal vi bare sende en anden ind.
Ja, men jeg skal alligevel den, så kan jeg tage den.
Fedt, Benjamin. Tak skal du have.
Da en amerikansk satellit tidligt i morges opfangede, hvad der angiveligt var en russisk Typhoon-klasse ubåd ved Grønland.
Can you say something about the difference, Birgitte, between those two scenes, or how to work with a scene like this with a lot of information that you have to send?
The challenging part in this scene was that the news story was of such a nature that all of our impulses were to like drop everything, chase the story. And then we needed to be reminded of Torben Friis' own agenda. So he has to mention this. But when we were on the floor, it felt so awkward to make that, gear change.
Yeah.
So we had to work around it. In the beginning, the first draft I read, I think Katrine was the one talking about, this is Darth Vader to you, isn't it? And I felt like I could not go to that point, so we placed the dialogue with Pia instead. But it's a tricky, and it is tricky when there is so much information you need to get across. But for us, it felt like a bump in the road, an obstacle, as opposed to where we would naturally go.
I completely understand.
It's not like, okay, can you defend yourself here?
A hellish scene to play, but at the same time, it was very, very needed there. And as I said earlier, we do have this body of information, and sometimes we have other scenes where we try to convey this information, and then we can see that we just have too many scenes. Then we start cutting scenes, and then obviously the newsroom is a beautiful arena where you can almost mention anything. Right? So you would want to kind of massage it in there, but at the same time there's this very important agenda around Torben Friis. And there's also, which I think you actually play so beautiful, there's also the theme around Katrine overstepping her boss role constantly. And basically, she has an editor there, and she's constantly basically moving into her area. So she's trying to be respectful at the same time. So I think we do get these nuances, but I know it's hellish because it's actually 4 storylines in one scene,
But it seems very sort of upbeat and dramatic.
Upbeat at the same time. And also, this scene is something they need to react on in the Ministry of in the Prime Minister's or Foreign Minister's office. At the same time, the 2 or 3 plot lines are constantly in dialogue with each other. And that just makes it very complicated sometimes. And then you might say, well, we throw in another theme at the newsroom because they still, they can always take another, and that is sometimes we're pushing the limits. We know that.
Are you sometimes surprised by something that might work quite well on paper, but once it becomes acted and performed and filmed, it changes the limit of how much? How many agendas you can have at the same time, or something that are added, of course.
Yeah.
Are you surprised sometimes?
Yeah, or sometimes where there's a very strong emotion, or maybe two characters that have something very special between them, and then all of a sudden there's a very important plot element that you want to emphasize, but there's such a strong emotion that has nothing to do with this. And it's just so beautiful. And sometimes you have to say, what do we want to underline with this scene?
Yeah.
And you might just end up saying, well, we'll just basically drop the plot here because the emotion is so important. So, and we have several examples of that where we actually said, well, we go with the emotion this time. Always try to go with the emotion if it's possible.
Yeah.
So we've seen that many times.
Yeah. And I think that having been in the editor chair myself, it's like you try to foresee, of course, what can be added later on, but sometimes it's really hard to.
Yeah.
But Birgitte, I was thinking about something that I've heard quite often among writers, that they are told by actors or directors that, yes, but what is the actor supposed to act here? What is he or she supposed to do? And I think it's, for many writers, it's quite blurry in a way, because it's like, but
do what's on the page.
Aren't they just supposed to say what's on the page or something like that?
Yeah.
And I think that this could be a great opportunity for you to just explain to us what actors mean by that. But maybe let's try to see you. I know you have an idea about what it takes for you to have a good scene.
Well, I was trained just across the street at the theatre school in the method of Stanislavski, and I'm not going to give you a whole lecture. It's just to say that what works well for an actor is to have what he calls an objective, which is like a goal, something you want to achieve or obtain, and then the given circumstances, which can be anything from the weather to how you feel inside. I gave you a very rough example, like if the objective is to seduce the other character, then the given circumstances could be the other character's state of mind. Is he drunk? Has he just lost his mother? All those things reflect on how I would, which tactic I would use to obtain my goal. And it could also be, if it's 40 degrees hot, it's a different way of seducing somebody as opposed to if it's freezing.
Yeah.
And all of these things inform the actor to try on different tactics. And what we really want is a physical action. And I know in the end we want emotions, but actually what I've been trained in, at least, is that emotions can be quite difficult to, because what is upset has different colors, or happy has different colors. So what we want is actions, because actions are actually much more readable for the viewers. So if you can get a clear objective and some really nice circumstances, preferably somebody who's in an obstacle for achieving this goal, then you really have some meat to work with. And what I find in TV and film is that often it's very different from writer to writer, but because a script also has to be read by the art department and the producer and people who have to visualize the film, most writers tend to write quite a lot of, he said stressfully, or she looks perplexed, or all these, which is actually my job. So when I started out doing Borgen, I was also a bit, young and obnoxious. I blacked out all of these actions because that's my job. You do not tell me how to do this. And sometimes you actually miss quite important information. So that's not really a good idea. But preferably, we would like to know, where is the character, what does the character want? And of course the dialogue, but then how it comes along. We would like to be given that freedom because and I can make a plan at home, and then I sit in front of a colleague who's giving me another different vibe, or the setting is different, and then it just completely changes.
Yeah.
So you really, in a perfect world, you cannot think it out beforehand at your desk. But then, also I think everybody here knows that on a set, there's so many technical limitations.
Yeah.
It's not about you can just do it again forever, and you do this fragment of the scene here, and then we move over here, and then the light is, and so there's so many limitations too. So the ideal world is almost never. But we make it work.
Yeah. And is it? Adam, I was thinking about this. There is many receivers of the script, right?
Oh yeah.
How do you work with that? Would you like to do a script for Birgitte that was only for the actors, or?
Well, we actually have a round which is mainly for the main actors. So there's a draft which is for Birgitte and Sisse, and in a way also for Mikkel in this. And the other actors, they basically get to say their bit when we do the reading. But we have a special draft for the main actors where we actually discuss it.
Is the draft just in process, or is it? Does it have another quality than a normal draft, or is it just a normal draft?
Worse.
It's much worse.
And longer.
No, I mean,
do you leave out stuff?
No, never. I mean, it's we do usually 5, sometimes 6, and hopefully never 7, but 6 drafts.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely do, and some of them are minor corrections. But the first 3 times through, they can be pretty very corrected during the process. And one of these would always be for the actors, and we would have a meeting, or we would have a long phone conversation with all the corrections, and then I'll try to do a better job next time, and we might actually be discussing it all along. I mean, also along the other drafts. But then, just as you say, there might be production notes that will change the scene also. And sometimes you just have these scenes in a newsroom that they just have to convey a lot of information, and still we want a little emotion. And of course, I feel the emotion the moment that Torben and Katrine, they have their moment together, where you sense that these are old colleagues, and the moment we can sense that she's trying to become wiser at her job, so she's trying to react respectfully towards her editor. That's where I get the emotion, even though it's so small, but that gives us, in a very information-heavy scene, it gives us a small notion of emotions there also.
Is it? We will get back to your collaboration in a moment, but just to hold on to this idea of who needs the scripts for what.
Yeah.
Is it? Have you ever thought about the idea that there could be different versions of a script, or would that just be chaotic and confusing?
I don't think the production would ever forgive us. No. It has to be. I mean, every draft is really an edition of the script, and it goes out to so many people.
Yeah.
And naturally, the moment it goes out to production, they began, finding stuff. They began working on the locations. So many things are being worked at the same time. And sometimes you have to say, no, you cannot look at the locations now because they are still in process. We're basically just looking at if we have the right story with the actors for this plot.
Yeah.
But it's a huge machine when it's running.
Also broadcasters, for instance, or financiers, or there are many people that need sometimes maybe to understand a little bit more about the characters than you would hope for was in the script.
Yeah. We've had the luxury this time, and even though this the new Borgen is a collaboration between Netflix and DR, I've only had meetings with the editor from DR, never Netflix, never at one thing, never notes from Netflix, only DR, which is quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I will say, to contradict myself, it's okay for us to. We can actually forget about those.
Black it out.
Yes, we could do that. No, but it's something is also our homework to figure out. Okay, what is the objective here, and what are the circumstances? But it's nice if it's easily readable in the scene. Another thing that can be tricky is if the dialogue is very on point as opposed to what the characters are thinking and feeling. If sometimes you want that layer of subtext where you're saying one thing but you're actually talking about something else, and that I find it in TV at least, and not just in Borgen. It's sometimes because of the lack of time you don't really get to that draft, and that can be tricky because it usually makes people quite sentimental or annoying if they say exactly how they're feeling.
Yeah.
So angry, so angry. But is this part of what you talk about at these meetings? What are the major? Are you very detail orientated, or are you talking about the larger sort of?
Well, it depends how many problems there are with the scene. I mean, so sometimes we are discussing, should the scene be there, or is the approach wrong with the scene? I mean, do we want something else from this scene? And naturally, we are always discussing where is the character emotionally at this stage of the show. And naturally, everybody wants to be good at their job. So we're frequently discussing. We have something which in the writers' room is called "Who gets the Nobel Prize in this scene?" And usually we have more than one contestant. Who is the wisest in the scene? Everybody wants to be the wisest in the scene. And naturally, if a very clever character is not necessarily the wisest in the scene, you should be able to explain why she or he is not the wisest in the scene. And there are all kinds of issues around who gets to explain something to another character. And of course, these years, we should be very aware of how we portray professional women and professional men. So there's also a huge body of things that we need to discuss there. And we are very up to it when we are discussing Borgen. We are constantly trying to say how many female parts, how many male parts, who gets to speak the most. Even though we have 50% women, 50% men, if the men are saying much more than the women, are we in fact moving the train backwards when we should be moving it forwards? Also when it comes to complete equality. So there's so many levels of interesting topics to discuss.
To explore.
And it's always in every show. It's a challenge if two people are talking about something they both know, but we need it for the audience because two journalists saying, as you know, it's like, why would they say that to each other? But that's always a constant challenge. But a frequent note from me to Adam in this season was, can we have a bit less mansplaining, please? And there was a lot of scenes where either Torben Friis or Pia or anybody would say, you're the boss now, you cannot do this. And I kept thinking, well, she knows she's the boss. But there were a lot of scenes where people were planting information on Katrina and she was just left going, oh, really? And for a while it really annoyed me. But then at some point I started thinking, well, this is actually how she feels. She feels her room of maneuver sort of closing in on her because what used to make her a really good journalist makes her a really bad boss. So in a way, it was sort of on a larger scale. It informed me as to how she actually was feeling because she felt like her options of actions were limited.
Yeah.
I think she's also a quite interesting modern woman in the sense that she is quite fast. And maybe she's generally too fast in a way for other people to follow. And that might not be a problem if you're a journalist, but because then you can surprise people. But as a boss, it might be a problem that she's not definitely a really good listener.
No. And naturally, in the best of worlds, you want the realism to be in the scene, you want emotional truth to be in the scene, and you want secrets to be in the scene. You want all these levels. And the best scenes, they have that. But naturally, we also need to convey information. And some people don't know the journalistic world as well as we possibly know it. So we still need to say, well, it's natural at a certain stage when a story is breaking. The boss of the whole department needs to know the source of the journalist, and we need to explain that, but the journalist would be reluctant to say who's my source because that's a personal secret for them. Stuff like that. The ordinary viewer might not know that. We need to throw in, just like you say, because they would both know it. So it's not very. It doesn't really satisfy the need for realism and true acting joy to convey all this boring information. So we try to find the middle road, which is always something we compromise, and still it needs to be vibrant. So,
and the subtext thing that you feel that sometimes doing TV series, you don't really get to the point where the subtext is very clear. Do you work with that on set then, or does things change on set sometimes? To sort of exchange dialogue with subtext, for instance? Or?
Sometimes. I think on the first 2-3 seasons, because Adam's always run a very generous writer's room. I mean, it's not often that you're as an actor are invited in at that early stage, which is truly a gift for us, because you feel like you're part of the collaboration. I think you will probably agree with me that at some point during the second season, we went a bit too far in rewriting your stuff, and I learned a lot from that as well. But
can you say something about what that was?
Well, it was towards the end of towards the end of the second, or was it the first season? I actually forget.
It was also with. Certain directors also like to play more with the material than others, and it's sometimes difficult to play with something which is also needs to be very on plot. Because you actually end up losing information, and then having to put it back, and then ending up at the worst possible alternative, where you need to cut to reaction shots and then throw in off dialogue to actually give us the information, which you never want to arrive at that stage. But we've arrived at that stage several times now.
Yes.
And I think we have a tradition of having feature film directors direct TV in Denmark as well, and because they're used to being, auteurs, I think for some of these it's been a struggle to realize, well, this is actually not my story, and they're so used to taking on that responsibility, and then because we don't have the tradition of actually having someone from the writers' room on set.
No.
Which is something I think we could explore in Denmark, because there is that. Then you have that opportunity to take it to the writers' room, saying, "We have this challenge, we cannot solve it. Can you please help us?" And then it would happen in collaboration as opposed to in opposition, or but minor changes that can make the dialogue. Sometimes it's throwing in a high. I remember in season 2, there was a scene after Kasper and Katrine had sex at the thing, He came to her apartment.
But sometimes we can actually also arrive at subtext by removing stuff.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, for you as an editor, a classical move to make. But there's, as said, there are so many, I think they're changing your micro. But as we just talked about, there are so many agendas around every edition of the script, and so much information that needs to be in there. But then when we sit in the editing room, we might say, that is such a beautiful, very expressive look she is wearing right there between those two lines, and we actually don't need the lines. So we might just remove the lines, but keep the gaze, because that tells us everything that the lines tell us. And then we could say, if we had had more time, we might have been able to discuss that we didn't need those lines in the first place, and you could just give us the gaze. but sometimes, the machine is basically working and forcing us to throw in a line that explains things than too much subtext that might be misunderstood or not understood at all. So it is a constant dialogue in the editing room and also throughout the process with the script and when they're acting it on set. It is a world of compromise.
Yes, and it's I think it's interesting what you say about the writers' room being present at set, because in my as I see it, it also ends up in the editing room very often.
It does,
and reminding people that if you remove something, there has to be something else instead. But it's an interesting suggestion, maybe that sometimes the writers should be more present, or things could be solved instead of being postponed to the editing room. But that's easier said than done, I know.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because it's basically the Danish or the Scandinavian interpretation of the old-fashioned American system that we arrived at, where we actually believe in the autonomy of the director on set, where we actually say, no, we've discussed it before in the various drafts of the script. Now we remove the writer, because if I was on set, I think a lot of people, knowing that the creator is on set, would be addressing me with looks at, are we doing the right thing? And I would sometimes maybe have a different idea of solving the scene, but by that, I would overstep, basically.
Yeah, and maybe lose
and
gifts from the
director.
writer.
I think the director would be like, am I the boss on my set, or are we here? Because, I mean, in the old-fashioned American system, there's no question who's the boss. The writer is the boss at all times. And he or she could at all times say, what's that hat the mother's wearing? Could we just remove the hat, please? Because it's completely wrong. And she shouldn't come in that way. She should come in from there. And it would just be, I think, completely removing any kind of direction autonomy from the director. You cannot have that in Denmark. I don't think it's very dangerous. So I think it's an interesting move, but it would be something that we would be able to we would have to discuss what is actually the role of the actor sitting there. The writer sitting there, not to disturb that precious collaboration between the actors and the director.
It sounds a bit like what you said to the question about episode writers as well.
Yeah.
That it is connected to this kind of flat structure in Denmark, that you would prefer to hand over some kind of responsibility, at least to get the gifts. I get
very much.
Also,
and if we should be able to address great directors, just like Per Fly, who was the conceptual director for this new season, and actually did the first 4 episodes, Per would be, I mean, he would not sign a contract if I was be sitting there on the first row, constantly saying, "No, Per, I wouldn't." I think it's dangerous. I actually like the way where we've discussed it, both with the actors, with the director, given them all the notes, and then it's their show. And there's something almost frightful of watching the dailies, because you haven't been there. How did they solve it? What? No. Sometimes you say, why did you scratch out that little directorial, note actually saying irony?
Please be ironic.
But it's just, I think it's in that constant, playful collaboration between acting, directing, writing, and editing that we've been able to, I think, in Scandinavia, to find a model which actually lets people do what they're best at and still feel some kind of personal responsibility for the whole thing.
Yeah. Is Per Fly, for instance, part of those meetings you have early?
He could be. Sometimes if they're very much to the wording of the scene, he might not be there. But I mean, he's done amazing stuff also with Chris, our photographer, and naturally the editors. But Per was very much, of course, he's very much an actor's director, and he basically came very much with the idea of giving us all these private moments. So sometimes a camera would just be on you for a very, very long time, and also not necessarily having lines. And these moments were very precious, but because we could throw them in, also sometimes in a different plot, but we could see that this character is living out a conflict, even though she's not speaking, she's actually living the conflict.
Yes. Birgitte?
Yeah, I was just reminded that Pilou Asbæk once had a note saying, Casper reveals nothing, but underneath 1,000 emotions. Like, how do you play that? But I hear what you're saying. No, I'm sure it was an episode, right? No, I understand what you mean, but my feeling was this time around, not so much with the first 3 seasons, that not particularly Per Fly, but some of the other directors actually felt that limitation and felt often they would feel like, I don't think we can do that because we have to check with the writers' room, and we have to do what's on the page. So in a way, I felt like your presence was there, and I know you are omnipresent. But so the freedom or the liberation to feel like now I am the director of this. I feel like that's probably not as present as you might think.
No. And naturally also if it's directors that are brought in to do 1 or 2 episodes, and they are very respectful of the whole concept of Borgen being an international show, and now it's the 4th season, and I need to be true to script. So they might not prone to being that independent. But we definitely try to applaud that independence as much as we can. And we, back in the day, with the first producer, Camilla Hammerich, of the first 3 seasons, we arrived very early at the point that also perhaps it was in our way of leading the show, but we couldn't actually do a show that paid tribute to democracy, but rule it through tyranny. It would be kind of a contradiction in terms and in concepts.
Yeah.
So we very much opened the doors for opinions from the main actors and discussing everything with the directors and the editors, the set designer. I mean, all of us on you could say the artistic bridge of the ship.
I would like to show you a clip that where I have a sense that you might not agree completely about how it was turned out. I know you discussed it a lot. Yes. It's also where the character Katrine Fønsmark ends up almost after 12 years. That's a big thing, of course, to discuss. So let's see the third clip and then talk about the disagreements in that.
Skal du? Jeg har den her idé om, hvordan vi kan få lavet kontor til dig inde i stallen. Lige snakke med elektrikeren. Der kommer nok til at gå en par uger, før at de kan få strøm ind.
Nå, men det er vel okay med nogle uger? Altså, lægen sagde 3 måneder.
Det må jeg vise dig. Ja. Kom, skal du se. Altså, du kan få din hele egen afdeling herinde. Altså, vi får alt det lort ud, ikke? Så dit skrivebord stiller vi her.
Men hvorfor skal jeg have min egen afdeling?
Men fordi, altså, Gustav og Møje, eller du har selv sagt.
Hvad har de sagt?
Ja, nogle gange, når du bliver presset på dit arbejde, så kan det være svært.
Du er virkelig verdens sødeste mand, du er. Og du står og slår krøller på dig selv, fordi du er bange for, at jeg starter for tidligt og går ned igen.
Jeg vil bare ikke have, der sker noget.
Det ved jeg godt. Så derfor vil du give mig min egen afdeling. Så børnene ikke forstyrrer mig, og jeg ikke snærer af dem. Ja. Jeg tænkte over noget. Du sikkert også har tænkt, men ikke har ville sige til mig. Jeg tror, jeg skal sige mit job op. Jeg tror, jeg skal skrive til Frederik, at jeg ønsker at fratræde stillingen som nyhedschef.
Yes. Could you tell me something about what the disagreements was about this? It's really the big arc of hers, right? Yeah.
I felt like the really interesting thing was that Katrine realizes there's something she's not good at. And I felt like that's must be such a profound revelation to someone who's always had so much identification in a professional job. And it's a very human thing, and I was very much in love with that part, her realizing it was me. It wasn't the, very annoying employees. It was actually me. And I wanted her to realize that actually in the scene, and then in some words conveying that to her husband. And in the early drafts, correct me if I'm wrong, she had actually made up her mind and came to say to him, I've actually written this email to my boss. And it was, for my money, it was very much about the wording, I want to resign, which I felt like it was more, for me it was more interesting to hear that she had made this discovery about herself.
Yeah, revelation.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, I think you arrived at a very beautiful scene where I actually think, even though it's really difficult, because Katrine Fønsmark is also a hero in the Borgen universe. And for her to actually realize that there's something in this world of journalism, there's something that I'm not necessarily as good as I would have wanted. That is a big thing. Also, to basically take a professional woman and actually make her resign is a big thing in the Borgen universe, because that is not the story we're telling. We're actually empowering our characters, and definitely also naturally also our female characters. So it's just not a very Borganish thing to resign. I mean, it's something that we've been discussing that so much. But one thing that we've always known about Katrine Fønsmark is that she is one hell of a journalist, and that she has so much backbone when it comes to journalistic bravery. And we basically wanted, even though we were probably ending the whole Borgen story here, I wanted her back at that stage where we were actually say, oh yeah, if you're going to write a book or whatever, I'm going to read that book. Because do I necessarily want her as boss of the news department, where she feels constricted in a way, because she cannot do what she wanted to do as a journalist, because she's actually an administrative force and not that much a journalistic force, not a narrative force of the department. So perhaps it was the right choice, but it was difficult to arrive at this stage where it's actually very emotional, and he is not mansplaining her into a decision, and she's being brave and fragile at the same time. So it needed many write-throughs, but I'm actually happy with the results. I hope you are too.
I've learned to live with it.
Exactly, yeah.
But it's interesting that they both do, right? Nyborg and Fønsmark, they both resign. But with a small sort of like...
but in different ways, yeah.
I think there's always been that mirror between them. You know, they're both idealists. And actually, they separate quite a lot in this season. And I understand completely, you know, that it's not a Borgen thing to do. But I actually end up really liking the fact that Katrine chooses not to let herself corrupt by power. She chooses to let go of the power instead. And in that way, she differs. Maybe because she's seen Nyborg, I don't know.
Maybe, yeah, because she's actually also at a very crucial stage. She says one of her journalists has seen Nyborg being extremely good at her job. And he says, do you like her? And she says, I like the politician. I don't particularly like the person. And which is a very crucial thing, because you've almost felt some kind of admiration, but it is a strictly professional admiration of Nyborg's way of actually being a tactical player on the field, but not a personal admiration at all. Because morally, she feels, but morally she feels that she has been corrupted.
I always loved the scene in the elevator after the interview.
Yeah.
At one take, I played it very emotionally because I felt like Katrine felt personally betrayed.
Yes.
And Sisse was looking like, what are you doing? Because I was so angry at her. What have you just done? And that was too much. But
still.
Underlying, there was that sensation.
How much is, now you talk about Sisse, how much is such a long collaboration with such different relations throughout different seasons? How much do the two of you discuss things, and how does that work?
During the first two seasons, we had almost no scenes together, a few and some key moments. But most of the days on set, I was with somebody else and she was with somebody else. And then in the third season, we had all our scenes together almost. So it's been very different. And then in this fourth season, we hardly ever saw each other. We really found a great, both friendship and collaborative process on the third season. And I think we were both, on a personal level, sad that we had so little screen time together in the fourth season. But we definitely, talk now and then and compare notes, because also we've been in it so long.
And how this 9-year gap between the third and the fourth
hardly
season.
see. It's
You can hardly see. It's amazing. Completely agree. But how did you work with that time span? You could see from the script, of course, that some circumstances was changed. But did you sort of add something into that time span yourself that maybe came out in subtext or in your behavior? Or?
I was very interested in one of the points we were talking about earlier, namely that Katrine has now sort of lost the black and white view of the world that she used to have, that she was more open to nuance and also to self-doubt. Because that's been my experience of getting older, that, you know, it's very difficult to have a very strong opinion about anything because you see, it's very easy to see the other side, you know? I know. And then I found it interesting that in the first 3 seasons, she was very good at her job and very bad at her personal life. And now it's changed. And I think that's one of the reasons it's become such an identity crisis, because she's always been a really good professional. And, you know, okay, so it was a mess back home and something with the, you know, changing men and all of that. But workplace was her safe space. And this time around it's just different, and then she just has no idea how to navigate, and that's why it becomes, why she crumbles in a way that we probably wouldn't expect, because we're used to seeing her being, you know, very, because she starts to question everything about herself.
It kind of mirrors Nyborg, as you talked about earlier, that she has removed, as you said at a point, that she removed everything that is normalizing in life in a way, that connects to normal life and other people. She has removed. So she has to navigate without that anchor, right? And you have to navigate without having your comfort zone in the professional life.
I think for her, one of the tipping points is when she starts to play Torben Friis politically, because that is so far away from who she is and what their relationship used to be. So when she tries to convince him of the brilliance of this idea of actually,
not doing something,
silencing him actually. I think in the aftermath of that, she must have thought, where am I getting to? Who am I now?
That was also clearly in the subtext. Actually,
But I think also I think it's quite beautiful in this scene, the way it dawns on you how everyone is trying to cope with you as a professional being in that household, and that the kids are also basically trying to step aside. And I think every professional that have been challenged and having to deal with a private situation at the same time, I think it's very relatable. I personally feel it's very relatable, and I also remember being a child actually with a very professional mother, being the boss of a drama department, and actually saying, could you just, when I get home from work, could you just not be there? I remember that day.
Wow.
Could you just be in your room? Because I just need a moment. Because if I'm so, and that was her way of saying, I hate my job. I hate my job. Certain days. And I just remember that. And so actually, your husband, Lars Mikkelsen's character, actually trying to set the stage for a new professional future after the breakdown, actually saying, and I can move the kids aside and we can do this new workspace for you where you don't have any contact with us. He is actually trying to construct a world that looks like Birgitte Nyborg's world, you know, whereas there's no one there. And I think it's actually very nice that you're saying, oh my God, I don't want that. I want something else. And that is brave.
So again, it's constantly working around this theme, right?
Yeah.
Professional, private. Okay, let's say a big thank you to both of you. So nice to be here with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.